Yes, hello, it's me, Johnny Dinock.
Dinock update.
So if you don't know, I've been working on a workshop character for a really long time now. I actually don't even know how long it's been. I've been in so deep. Turns out workshop creation's really hard. Who could have seen that coming? So far, development of Dinock is going pretty much exactly how I expected. In fact, if anything, it's actually going a little bit better than I expected. But yeah, if you don't know, on my stream, I had a sub goal. Hey, go follow my Twitch. Wow. I had a sub goal to create a workshop character. I hit that goal, and that was a mistake. I've actually been having a blast making Dinock. It has been so much fun. And so, I just want to say right up front, I am by no means someone who's good at this. This is not a tutorial. A lot of people ask me for advice ever since I started making Dinock. And the first thing I tell people is, don't ask me for advice. Go to someone else, because I've never done this before. I don't know anything about coding. I don't know anything about pixel art. I've just been learning as I go. I'll say I'm very happy with what I've done so far. I do feel like it's pretty good. I'm happy with it. I look at it and then I look at rival stuff and I go, it's not as good. But I don't hate it. I've seen worse. For my first time ever doing it, I think it's not bad. So basically in the beginning, I coded like all of the basic stuff, all of the main unique interactions that I could get away with. But now I've been kind of going back and forth. I would pixel art a move, then go into the game, code the move to work the way I want, finish it, then go back and repeat. And I think going about this is, I will say, pretty good. At least it's been working out for me doing this method. Like the coding and the art do matter, like they do connect, they do like go together. It's not just like, oh, you do some art and then you do some coding and you just throw it on top. The frame data drastically affects what you can do with your animations. That's something that took me quite a bit to learn. It was a huge learning process. With multiple moves, I've worked on an animation and then I've basically scrapped like half the frames that I animated, being like, oh wait, this doesn't work, which I know is probably a very simple basic animation thing that anybody who's ever animated is like, yeah, duh. But I didn't know that. Something I've learned. Where you convey the motion is drastically affected by how much startup a move has and how much end lag a move has and how active a move is. Like a move with a very small amount of startup, you have to really convey that move that it's happening actually on the opposite end after it's already over, essentially. So basically, like with my processes, I would animate like a rough version of the move I wanted to do, and like the longer I've done it now, the rougher actually it's getting, and then I throw that into the game. I throw a really awful version of the animation in the game to really get a sense of like, oh, okay, I need more frames here and less frames here, and etc., things like that. So like coding and the art kind of work hand in hand, and sometimes I would edit the coding to match the art. Most of the time I'd edit the art to match the coding, because mechanically it is the most important part to me. And so yeah, my art isn't amazing, but I think it's really functional, and that's the important part. That's what I'm going for. I think my art is at the very least the bare minimum of what probably should be required in a workshop character. Again, a lot of people ask me for information, and like, so the first thing I say again, no, don't do that. But the other thing I say is, at least what's helped me, some guy who's never done art before, was Captain Christian's 12 Principles of Animation video, where Captain Christian goes over like Disney's principles of animation. I think that was extremely helpful, just in understanding, like giving me like a foundation to work off of. And then the main thing for me is, I don't consider my art good, but I consider it not bad. If that makes sense. I know people are like, well, isn't that the same thing? Well, not exactly. Like, someone who's good makes something good. But for me, I make something bad. And then I work at it and I work at it and I work at it until it's not bad anymore. That's how I look at it. And I'm sure like people who are actually talented might even say like, that's actually the process. Someone who's good probably just goes through that process much, much faster than someone like me. So that's another thing, is it's just like, it just takes longer, right? I've been working on Dinock for so long. When you compare me to like other workshop creators, some of which have made like 3 or 4 characters in the amount of time I'm still halfway through Dinock. But that's the sacrifice. My lack of talent, I have to make up for it with hard work and brutal honesty. That's another thing, is like, when I make an animation, I look at it and I go, is this good enough? And most of the time, no. And so I work at it and I erase stuff and I redo it until I'm happy with it. Like, I just try to get to myself to the point where I'm like, it's good enough. I think this is the best I can do. Is it the best I can do? then the animation is done. And actually, really, all my animations aren't really done. They're all done with kind of an asterisk. One, there's like some detail I still have to do on them that I got lazy and I didn't want to do. And two, like, I'm definitely open and willing to come back and just redo a lot of them. Like certain moves, like the proportions are definitely the hardest part for me. Proportions and perspective is just like such a difficult thing to maintain when you have no practice at all. One thing I started doing was the idle animation, or really the one frame of the idle animation. That became like my foundation. In later moves, I started just always having that open, just so I could reference it and be like, okay, this is how big Dinock should look. And I still don't think, like, there's definitely some moves where the proportions get wonky. What I learned is Dinock's anatomy was, I think, a really big mistake. I don't know, it probably doesn't really matter. I would probably still have like the same issues if I made a humanoid character, but I do think, at least with reference too, when you look at like the Rivals characters, which are a great reference, but sometimes their reference don't work when I applied to Dinock because his anatomy is so weird and different. Like Dinock's body is so much forward and his feet are so far behind. I saw some people freak out like, oh, my hurt box looked weird. But there's a reason for that. Like his hurt box has to look like that. You wouldn't want to get hit in an area where there's just empty space. If you look at like all the Rivals characters, their anatomy actually all fit like a square. Dinock's doesn't. And so it's created some issues when I look at a Rivals character and then I try to do the same thing to Dinock. I'm like, oh, this doesn't work. Dinock's a freak. Any advice to any new workshop creators: make a humanoid character. Don't make a weird Velociraptor thing because it's just harder. I think my character would have looked better if I had gone with a more humanoid look. And another thing for, you know, this character's success so far is I obviously have to thank Captain Technicality. The dude's been there almost every stream. I really literally could not have done it without you, or will continue to not be able to do without you. Thank you anyway. Thank you. He's been so helpful with the code and even with the art. So like, honestly, in a lot of ways, I really lucked out with getting help from him as well. Like I think just like in a lot of the development of this character, I think I've just gotten really lucky in a lot of ways since I have some of the resources other people don't have. And so yeah, Dinock, the development's going really good. I still have basically all the specials to do and the smashes. And so something I noticed when coming in and coding the move is, basically, I started with the baseline of Melee Yoshi, right? That's what Dinock's based off of. Every move, every normal, I should say. The specials definitely go in a different direction, but most of the normals all started as a Yoshi normal. And a lot of them have stayed the same, but some of them I've had to make very different. Something I noticed when actually looking at Melee Yoshi data is that Melee is very different from Rivals in terms of knockback. Most of Yoshi's moves have basically no base knockback and very high scaling knockback. And I think this is actually a fairly common thing in terms of most Melee characters' moves. But this is what creates like a lot of situations in Melee where a lot of things are just straight up negative on hit, especially at low percents. Or a lot of things are really, really beatable by crouch canceling. And it's because of this low base knockback. Rivals doesn't really do that. Rivals goes about it in a different way. Most Rivals moves are positive on hit, as in if you hit them, even at like 0%, they're gonna be in enough hit stun and you're gonna be active before them. And this just goes with the trend that like Rivals defensive mechanics are kind of downplayed in general. It also makes sense too because there's no shield. When you hit somebody, if you're negative, then you have no options. But in Melee, at the very least, you have a frame 1 shield. But obviously playing around that low percent is a big part of Melee, something that's kind of that's actually lacking in Rivals. So something I've had to do is, even though I wanted them to be Yoshi type aerials, I've had to raise the base knockback on a number of different moves. Before we end though, I just want to address a couple of frequently asked questions that go on during the development of Dinock. Everyone is always asking me about,
what's his taunt gonna be like? What are Dinock's colors gonna be like? What's Dinock's lore? Dinock ate apples, would he like apples?
And the thing is, all of those, I don't fucking care. Something that I feel like is a slight divide between the majority, or I don't know, enough members that I interact with in the workshop community and myself is, I'm making this character because I like Melee Yoshi and I like the mechanics of Melee Yoshi. I want to see what a Yoshi-like character would look like with the mechanics of a Rivals character. The way Dinock looks, all of that stuff is secondary. It came afterwards. I was like, okay, Yoshi, armor, rocks are like armor. There's no lore that came to that, right? I don't care. It just is a thing so that it looks okay. Now that being said, like, I obviously don't entirely not care. He's not just a blank blob. The idea is you look at him and then you can kind of get a sense, but like if you're asking me questions beyond that, I just got nothing for you because my character is mechanics first. I think unlike a lot of workshop creators, I'm one of the few that has played Rivals a lot competitively for a very long time before Workshop ever came out. So like now that Workshop's here, I'm going into it with that mentality. Workshop has drawn a lot of new people in, which is great, but I think a lot of new people are coming in with a completely different outlook, which is fine. That, you know, that's a fresh way of looking at it, but it's not the way I'm looking at it. Like a lot of people come in with the idea of like, oh, this character and this has this story, and they like really like fleshing out the backstory of their character. But for me, I look at my character in the context of it's in a fighting game. My character's barely a character. He's really a fighting game tool, right? I want to put him in my hands and hit things with it. I don't care if he likes apples or not. Like, this isn't meant to be any kind of judgment on people. If you want your character to like apples, you know, give him as many apples as you want. But I don't care. Don't stop asking me about it. That's what I want. Ask me about the mechanics of my character. I feel like nobody cares. Nobody's like, oh, how's this double jump gonna work? How do armor points work? And maybe I've just done a very good job of explaining it in my other video. But I don't know. I feel like everybody really just wants to know if he likes apples instead. But anyway, all that aside, I've been having a ton of fun making Dinock. I will continue to do it. Again, please follow my Twitcheroni, and you know, like and subscribe as well too. That's what cool people do, right? I'm pressuring you into doing it because I'm an influencer. Anyway, thank you to my patrons and Twitch subs. You guys are amazing. I'll see you all on the flip flop.